The late-day sun painted the rodeo grounds in deep gold, casting long shadows behind every cowboy leaning over the wooden fence. The crowd had gone still, not a whisper in the stands. Boots scuffed dust, hats shaded tense eyes. At the center of it all, sprawled across the dirt, was Bo Haverly, legend, survivor, and tonight. Just a man face down in silence. Bo's hand twitched weakly against the packed earth. His denim shirt, torn and dirt-stained, clung to his back like a second skin. The black protective vest he wore barely softened the blow when he came crashing down. He hadn't lasted more than 7 seconds. He wasn't as fast as he used to be, and Rattlesnake, the beast that threw him, was stronger than anything Bo had ever ridden. Thick-necked, copper-toned, eyes dark as coals. The bull stood, inches from Bo's still body, muscles twitching, breathing hard, hooves kicking up little clouds of dust. The crowd held its breath. Bo, the rodeo announcer with a voice like bourbon and gravel, fell silent behind the mic. Near the rails, Gunnar Klein, the young buck just starting his career, watched with wide eyes, knuckles white on the fence. No one dared move. And then, just as quietly as the dust settled, Rattlesnake did something no one expected. He lowered his head, then his body, and folded his legs beneath him until he was lying down beside Bo. Calla Emberton hadn't planned on coming to the rodeo. She hadn't seen her father in over 6 years. But something had pulled her there that night, maybe old guilt, maybe unfinished pain. She stood halfway up the bleachers, frozen hand covering her mouth. Her boots felt bolted to the planks beneath her. The sight of her father crumpled in the dirt beside that massive animal knocked the air from her lungs. But it was the bull calm, resting, watching Bo that truly shattered something inside her. She stepped down slowly, moving past Tucker Vance, the town sheriff, who was already reaching for his radio. "Wait," she whispered, more to herself than anyone. Jolie McCrae, seated at the bottom row, caught her hand for just a second. "Let him see you," Jolie said gently. Calla nodded, heart pounding against her ribs, and stepped closer to the fence. Rattlesnake's ears flicked, but he stayed down. Bo hadn't moved again. Then, just as her hand touched the top rail, Bo's fingers curled slightly in the dust. His eyes cracked open, swollen and red, but alive. He blinked, and the first thing he saw was not the bull beside him. It was Calla, and in that look something deep shifted. Something that hadn't been spoken in years. Bo's vision flickered like an old bulb in a barn. Light, dust, sunlight, and the blurred outline of a face. It took him a moment to understand what he was looking at. Not a medic, not a rodeo hand. It was Calla. Her face was older than the last time he'd seen it, worn by time and hardened by things she never told him. But those eyes, his late wife's eyes, still cut straight through him. Calla couldn't speak. She stood at the edge of the fence, frozen in place, unsure if she should cross it. She'd spent years building walls between them, not fences to climb over. Her arms wrapped around herself like she was holding something broken inside. Watching her father on the ground, like that battered, vulnerable, knocked loose a storm she buried for too long. She hadn't cried yet, but her throat burned with the effort not to. Creedon Asheville finally moved, speaking low into his mic to calm the crowd, then motioned for the medical team to hold off. "Not yet," he said, eyes locked on the strange stillness in the arena. Even Tucker Vance, who usually barked orders before thinking, stood with his hat in his hands, watching the scene unfold like it was something sacred. No one had ever seen Rattlesnake this way. It wasn't just submission. It was almost mourning. Bo slowly turned his head toward the massive bull lying beside him. Rattlesnake wasn't looking at him anymore. He was staring off into the distance, calm but alert, like a guardian. Bo let out a hoarse breath and tried to push himself up, but his shoulder screamed in protest. He collapsed again, face twisting in pain. Still, he didn't cry out. He just muttered through clenched teeth, "Damn thing still rides like hell." That broke something in Calla. She ducked under the fence without hesitation, boots kicking up dust as she rushed to his side. She dropped to her knees, hands hovering over his back, unsure if she should touch him. "Don't move," she said, voice shaking. "You could have broken your damn neck." The BO tried to laugh, but it came out more like a cough. "Is that worry I hear?" he rasped. "Didn't think you had any left for me." She didn't respond. Instead, she looked at the bull again. Rattlesnake remained still, his breathing slow and even. The arena was so quiet, they could hear the wind sliding past the flags. Calla looked back at her father. "Why now, B.O.?" she asked. "Why come back to ride?" Bo's eyes met hers. What he was about to say would shake loose more than just. Dust up, B.O. didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened, and his gaze drifted toward the dirt. The silence between them stretched like barbed wire, sharp, uncomfortable, impossible to ignore. He shifted slightly, wincing as pain lanced through his ribs. "Because it was time," he muttered. "Time to stop running from ghosts." He looked back up at her, eyes raw. "You think I rode for the crowd? For a damn buckle? I came here for you." Calla blinked, caught off guard. Her heart slammed once in her chest. She wanted to yell, to tell him it was too late for apologies, too late for gestures wrapped in blood and dust. But she didn't. She just stayed there, kneeling beside the father who'd vanished without explanation when she needed him most. "You left after Jake's funeral," she said softly. "You didn't even say goodbye." Her voice cracked on the last word. "You just disappeared." B.O. swallowed hard, throat thick. "I couldn't look at you, not after what happened to your brother. I blamed myself. I thought maybe if I disappeared, I could take the blame with me." He paused. "Turns out, ghosts don't care how far you run." His voice was flat, but his eyes, those weathered, broken-down eyes, were full of something deeper than guilt. It was shame high on the rails. Creedon watched the two from under the brim of his sweat-stained hat. He hadn't heard B.O. speak like that in decades. The old cowboy had kept his pain bottled up tighter than a sealed whiskey barrel. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "He's finally letting it out." Gunnar Klein stood beside him, arms crossed, watching like a student witnessing something holy. "That bull laid down for a reason," Creedon added. "That ain't just chance." Meanwhile, Rattlesnake stirred slightly but didn't rise. His body remained low, tail twitching now and then in the dust. Whatever force had calmed him was still, present, tangible, like static before a summer storm. Calla glanced at the bull, then back to B.O. "You can't fix this in one ride," she said, voice low but firm. "You can't just show up and expect it all to go away." B.O. nodded slowly. "I know, but I had to start somewhere. I didn't come here looking for forgiveness, Calla. I came to earn it." He coughed again and winced. 1 second on that bull felt more honest than years of silence. Calla looked away, eyes glassy, the wind catching her hair. Something had shifted between them, but it wasn't peace. Not yet. It was the beginning of a reckoning neither of them were prepared for. They sat side by side in the dirt for a long moment, neither speaking. The arena around them began to stir again, boots crunching, murmurs returning, a distant whistle from the far end. But in that small circle of space around B.O. and Calla, time still felt slow. Rattlesnake finally stood, dust falling from his hide like ash from a dying fire. He let out a soft grunt and was calmly led back toward the pen. No one cheered. Number 1 clapped. It didn't feel right. Creedon Asheville met the bull handlers near the gate and leaned in with a warning. "Watch him close tonight. That bull saw something we didn't." Then he turned and walked toward the fence where B.O. still sat. He tipped his hat low. "I'll give you all some space," he said to Calla. "But don't let that man fool you. He's carrying more weight than that vest can hold." Calla gave him a short nod, but her eyes never left her father. Bo tried to shift his legs, but the pain caught him. Calla moved instinctively, steadying him without a word. Her hands were warm, firm, medical. Years of nursing had trained her to touch gently, even when her heart felt cold. "You should be in an ambulance," she muttered. Bo gave a dry smile. "Wouldn't be my first rodeo injury. Probably won't be my last." But the smile faded as quickly as it came. "You said you blamed yourself," Calla said, tightening her grip on his elbow. "For Jake?" Her voice wavered. "Why?" Bo looked away, jaw clenched. The sun dipped lower now, cutting across the arena in long shadows. "He wanted to." "Right," Bo said finally, and I pushed him. Told him he'd never be a man if he kept quitting every time he got bucked off. He swallowed hard. The night he died, he was trying to prove something to me, and I let him. Calla stared at him, breath caught in her throat. She remembered Jake limping through the back door, blood on his jeans and pride in his grin. She remembered her mother yelling at Bo in the kitchen, and Bo storming out. She never knew what the fight had been about, until now. "He was 18, she said quietly. He didn't need to prove anything. Bo finally looked at her, eyes brimming with something old and bitter. "He did, because I made him believe he did. And I've been trying to outrun that night ever since." Calla stood, brushing dirt from her jeans, heart pounding. "Well," she said, voice low, running stops now. And with that, she turned and started walking. Not away, but towards something neither of them could name yet. Calla didn't go home. She drove straight to Jolie McRae's old ranch house. On Dusk Grove Road, where the porch lights glowed like lanterns in a storm. Jolie had been her mother's best friend, and in many ways, her second mother too. Calla didn't knock. She just walked in, heart pounding. The smell of old cedar and sun-dried linens filled the air. She made her way to the kitchen, paused, and opened the bottom drawer on the left, just like she remembered. There it was, a yellowed envelope with her name on it, written in her mother's delicate, looping handwriting. She had found it years ago, after Nancy passed, but never had the strength to open it. Not until tonight. Not after seeing Bo broken and honest for the first time in years. She sat down at the table where her family once shared cornbread and arguments and slowly slid the letter out. The paper trembled in her hands. Her mother's words unfolded like a voice from another life. "Calla, if you're reading this, then time has done what I feared it would, push your father too far from you. But you deserve to know. Bo wasn't always this way. Something inside him broke the night Jake died. But before that, he was a man who loved you with his whole soul. He just never knew how to show it without breaking himself in the process." Calla read the letter twice, her throat closing tighter each time. There were mentions of arguments behind closed doors, of Bo crying alone in the barn, of long nights when he'd drive off and sleep in his truck. "Your father carries guilt like a saddle he never takes off." But it wasn't just Jake's death. It was what happened before, something Bo never told anyone. Not even me. That line stopped her cold. What could be worse than losing his son? What was it Bo had buried even deeper? The wind howled against the kitchen window like a warning. She folded the letter slowly and slipped it back into the envelope. Her mind raced with questions, but one word kept surfacing louder than the rest. Why? Back at the rodeo grounds, Bo lay in a cot inside the medical tent, bandaged and sore. The arena lights flickered above him, buzzing like distant bees. Creedon. Asheville stood near the doorway, arms crossed. "You told her yet?" he asked. Bo closed his eyes. "Not all of it." Creedon shook his head. "She's gonna find out, Bo, one way or another." Bo turned his face toward the canvas wall, his voice barely above a whisper. I know. The next morning, the dusk-grove sky was thick with fog. Calla parked her truck in front of the old Haverly barn, abandoned, gray, and weather-worn like the man who once worked it. She hadn't stepped foot here in nearly a decade. The fence was broken in 2 places. Weeds choked the gate. But the memories hit her like thunder. Jake brushing the horses, Bo shouting from the hayloft, her mother humming hymns while sweeping. The porch. This place held stories no one ever finished telling. She walked slowly toward the barn doors, her boots crunching over gravel and fallen hay. Inside, the air smelled of mold, old oil, and something sadder like time that had been left to rot. Tools still hung neatly on the wall. A saddle rested on a broken stand. But what caught her attention was a small box tucked behind a row of feed sacks, barely visible in the dim light. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. The box creaked open, and inside were photographs, receipts, and a folded letter addressed to Creedon, Nashville. Her brow furrowed. Why would her father write to Creedon? She opened the letter carefully. The handwriting was unmistakably Bo's, angular, rigid, as if the man had fought for every word. It wasn't a letter. It was a confession. Creedon, if I don't come back from that arena, there's something you need to know. Something I buried a long time ago and never had the guts to say. Jake wasn't supposed to ride that night. I switched the draw. It was Gunner's bull. I made the call. Jake begged me not to. Said he wasn't ready. I told him to stop being weak. Told him Duskgrove men don't back down. I thought I was making him strong. Calla dropped the letter like it was on fire. Her heart thundered. All these years, she had blamed fate, the rodeo, maybe even Jake himself. But it wasn't chance that killed her brother. It was Bo. Her father had chosen to put Jake on that bull. He had changed the draw, pushed him to prove something, and it cost them everything. Back at the rodeo grounds, Bo sat alone outside the medical tent, watching the early riders prepare for the day. His ribs ached, but the pain in his chest had nothing to do with broken bones. Creedon approached quietly, a coffee in each hand. She find the letter today, Creedon said. Bo didn't look away. I know. He took the coffee with a shaking hand, and when she does, she won't look at me the same. She wouldn't. Calla didn't knock on the door of the medical tent. She walked straight in, mud still on her jeans, the confession letter crumpled in her hand. Bo looked up from his cot the second he felt her presence, like he knew she was coming, like he'd been waiting for the storm. Her expression wasn't anger, not at first. It was something deeper. Disbelief. Betrayal. The kind of pain that only blood can cause. You switched the draw, she said. No greeting, no hesitation. You put Jake on that bull. Bo sat up slowly, each movement stiff and deliberate. He didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. I did. The silence that followed was thick and sharp. Calla stepped closer, her boots heavy on the floor. You let him die to prove some twisted idea of manhood? Her voice cracked. He begged you. Bo couldn't meet her eyes. I thought I was making him stronger. I thought, if he got through that ride, maybe he'd stop running from himself. His voice was gravel. I was wrong. I've been wrong ever since. Calla dropped the letter onto his chest. You don't get to say that now. You don't get to act like guilt is enough. Her eyes were wet but blazing. You buried him with your silence. And you buried me with it too. Bo's face crumpled like old leather. I've carried that day every damn second of my life. There's not a morning I don't hear his voice, or a night I don't see him fall. He looked up at her raw. I didn't come back to make it right, Calla. I came back so you'd know the truth, even if it means losing you for good. That hit harder than he expected. She looked away, fists clenched at her sides. Outside, the rodeo had begun again. Cheers and buzzers, and the sound of spurs on dirt. But inside that tent, it was just the two of them, standing in the wreckage of everything they never said. "You want the truth?" Calla said finally, voice shaking. "You didn't just break Jake. You broke me. I stopped believing in you the day you left us standing at his grave." Bo's breath caught. She had never said that out loud before. She turned to leave. For a second, Bo almost called out, but he couldn't find the words. As the flap of the tent swung open and the sunlight poured in, she paused. "Don't follow me," she said without turning. "Not yet." And then she was gone, swallowed by the dust and noise, leaving Bo in the silence he'd built for himself. One decision at a time, the sun had started to dip again, casting long shadows across the rodeo grounds as the last riders finished their rounds. Calla sat alone in the stands, far from the crowd, her hands clenched in her lap. She wasn't crying anymore. She'd done that in her truck, parked down by the creek where Jake used to fish. Now, there was only silence, heavy, weighted, and underneath it, the echo of her mother's voice. "Your father's heart broke long before he ever showed it." Down in the arena, Gunnar Klein climbed onto the rails, eyes searching for someone. In the stands, he spotted her but didn't call out. Something in her posture told him to stay back. He respected that. He had looked up to Bo his whole life, but hearing whispers about Jake's death, about the draw being switched, it shook him. Heroes weren't supposed to bleed guilt like that, but maybe that's what made them human in the end. Inside the barn, Bo stood facing an old wooden beam where Jake had carved his name with a pocket knife. The letters were still there, faded but strong. He ran his fingers over them like a prayer. His ribs hurt with every breath, but the pain in his chest had little to do with the fall. "Jake, I failed you," he thought, "but I won't fail her too." He turned, walked slowly to the tack room, and reached for something he hadn't touched in years. An old leather journal. Calla found it waiting on the porch of Joey McRae's house that evening, wrapped in twine. Her name scratched across the front cover in faded pen. She stared at it for a long time before picking it up. Inside were dated entries, some barely legible, others written with the pressure of a man trying not to come undone. Every page told a piece of her father she never knew. His anger, his shame, his love for her and Jake, even when he didn't know how to show it. The final entry was dated just a week before the rodeo. It read, "If she never forgives me, I'll understand. But if she ever reads this, maybe she'll know I never stopped being her dad, even when I didn't deserve the title." Calla closed the journal and pressed it to her chest. Her breath caught somewhere between a sob and a sigh. That night, as the arena lights flickered off and the dust finally settled, she didn't speak to Bo, but she didn't walk away either. She sat on Jolie's porch, journal in hand, the night air warm around her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel lost. She just felt unfinished. Bo sat on the edge of the corral fence the next morning, a blanket draped over his shoulders, and steam rising from a chipped mug of black coffee. The rodeo grounds were nearly empty, now just a few crew members packing up, and the hum of a distant generator. He watched the sun rise slowly over the horizon, painting the sky with soft oranges and worn-out blues. His body still ached, but it was nothing compared to the weight, the not knowing, the silence from Calla. He heard footsteps in the gravel before he saw her. Calla walked toward him, journal clutched tightly in one hand, her free hand shoved into her coat pocket. She didn't look angry. She didn't look soft either. She looked like someone who'd been carrying a heavy load and finally set it down, but still wasn't sure what to do with her hands. Bo straightened up, unsure whether to speak or just wait. She reached the fence, eyes fixed on the arena dirt, then looked up at him. "I read it," she said simply. "All of it?" Bo nodded slowly. "Wasn't sure you would." Calla leaned against the rail beside him. "You wrote like someone who thought he was already dead." The words weren't meant to be cruel. They were just true. Bo gave a bitter smile. "Some days, I felt like I was." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the wind whistle through the panels of the old bleachers. Then, softly, Calla spoke again. "You didn't know how to be a father. I get that now, but I still needed one." Bo turned toward her. Eyes damp. "I know. And I'll never stop regretting that I wasn't. But I'm here now. I know that don't erase the past. But I'd like to try and be part of whatever future you'll let me into." Calla took a long breath. "You don't get to skip the hard parts, Bo. You don't get a clean slate just because you hurt too." She looked at him fully now, her voice trembling just slightly. "But I don't want to keep carrying this weight either. I think maybe it's time we stop bleeding in silence." Bo blinked hard, nodding slowly, as if afraid to speak would ruin the fragile moment between them. Then, she reached into her coat and pulled out an old photo Jake on his horse, smiling, wind in his hair. She handed it to Bo without a word. He took it gently, like holding something sacred. And in that quiet, under the slow Texas morning, something between them finally cracked, not in pain this time, but in healing. A week later, the rodeo grounds had emptied out completely. The banners were taken down, the chutes locked, and the dust had settled into silence. But at the Haverly barn, there was life again. Bo stood in the open doorway, watching as Calla parked her truck beside the old feed shed. She stepped out slowly. Same boots, same guarded eyes, but her shoulders didn't seem as heavy anymore. He'd spent the past days cleaning the barn, one stall at a time. Not because it needed it, but because he did. Every shovel of old straw, every oiling of rusted hinges felt like a quiet apology one he knew words alone couldn't deliver. Calla stepped inside, looking around with quiet disbelief. "Didn't think I'd ever see this place alive again," she said. Bo gave a faint smile. "Neither did I." They worked in silence for a while side by side. Not quite easy, but not tense either. Just two people sharing space again. At one point, Calla picked up a halter Jake had once used. She turned it over in her hands, thumb brushing over the name stitched into the leather. "He loved this place," she said. "Even after everything." Bo leaned on the stall gate, voice low. "I know. He had more heart than I ever knew what to do with." Later, as the sun dipped behind the hills, they sat on the porch, watching the sky shift from amber to dusk. Bo sipped his coffee slowly, both hands wrapped around the mug like it was something to hold on to. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said finally. "Not all the way. Maybe not ever." Calla didn't answer right away. She looked out at the fields, the wind brushing loose hair across her face. "I'm not sure forgiveness is something you give all at once," she said. "Maybe it's something you choose, a little more every day. I don't know what we're supposed to be now, Bo, but I don't want to keep pretending like you're already gone." Bo nodded slowly, his throat tight. "I'll take whatever you're willing to give, even if it's just this." He motioned to the quiet moment between them. "This is more than I thought I'd ever get." The porch light flicked on as night settled in. Calla stood, stretched, and turned toward her truck. Then she stopped. "You ever think about riding again?" Bo let out a dry chuckle. "Only in my sleep." She smirked. "Good. Let's keep it that way." She paused. "See you tomorrow?" Bo looked up, hope flickering in his tired eyes. "I'd like that." And as her truck pulled away, for the first time in a long, long while, he didn't feel alone.